prepping and pivoting for Eternal Weekend.
I don't know how to do either. Next on Eternal Durdles.
Extreme thank you to all the Durdle Maniacs that support the show. If you want to get ad-free content and extra free content, you can go to patreon.com/eternaldurdles and support us. Proceeds go to editing the show, upgrading equipment, and helping us travel to events. What it do? Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Bleckman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Zach, I'm going to have to prep and pivot off of this episode because we're talking about something that I have never actually demonstrated I have the capacity to do.
Well, Phil, we're gonna get you on board because we've been talking back and forth about one of the things we think that our podcast is lacking.
It's talking back and forth. We don't talk back and forth enough.
We don't talk back and forth enough. No, no. One of the things we've been kind of harping on for ourselves as like sort of a personal goal is to have like a decent showing at one of these larger events. We're always there with the information first. In fact, somebody at LobsterCon once said to us over the weekend, these guys are the most prolific legacy podcast. It's not untrue. We're posting 2-3 times a week sometimes. But we don't have those results to back up our expertise. We just have the time that we spent in this format to back up our expertise. So what we'd like to do is to bring forth the effort to back up our braggadocious nature, you know. Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the best Magic the Gathering deck building website on the internet. You can create, share, and find decks from Commander to Legacy and even fan-supported formats like Pre-Modern and Old School. You can see all of our decks on our Moxfield. Follow the links below to stay tuned.
Are we braggadocious? I mean, we're only the best. We're only the best legacy podcast out there. I don't know if we're braggadocious. We're the longest running, best theory crafting, hard hitting, show stealing, heart stopping legacy podcast. I don't know if we're braggadocious.
To quote the late great Muhammad Ali, it ain't braggadocious if it's true.
It just ain't braggadocious. So we're just a truthful podcast. I don't know.
Yeah. But so one of the things we've been talking about is upping our practice regimen, possibly pivoting to decks that we're not always playing all the time. Which we'll see if Phil decides to not play Miracles at a large event. But I've definitely learned over the last year to pivot to decks that I think are better positioned in the meta than like I would say I'm super comfortable with. And that has been bearing fruit. Like I had that recent like 9th place in a challenge. I'm generally 4-1-ing like the leagues and stuff like that. I haven't gotten a trophy on a league yet. So like, inquiring minds will know the first time I trophy a league because it hasn't happened yet. And I've only, sort of just recently really gotten really serious about playing Magic Online, and Magic Online being like a great place to go if you want to get those reps in. Like that's you can't just go to your local every once a week, play 4 rounds, and be like, yep, I have a mastery of this format. We live in the format for sure. We're talking and thinking about it constantly, but you do need to get those reps in, and that's one of the things that I felt last Eternal Weekend. I was only getting like 1 or 2 a month tournaments a month, so I really needed to. The theory crafting was there, but the reps, the understanding, what decks I need to play against, what play patterns could happen, what I need to watch out for, all that stuff, I wanted to take a whole lot more seriously this year. And so, learning the matchups, learning other decks, and knowing how to play against those decks was a big part of this year for me as well. Which is why I spent so much time learning like Beanstalk decks and stuff like that. Decks that normally like I wouldn't consider myself a 5-color control player. But it was a deck that I could, somewhat easily build. And I knew that it was a deck I would see at larger events. So I wanted to understand how to attack a deck like that. So that was a lot of my summer was spent kind of figuring out like, okay, now that I understand this matchup, and through that, you're going to understand how to play against other decks as well, just because you have to play against other decks. I think I've leveled up my game significantly in the last like 2 or 3 months just by getting those reps in.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm over here getting my deduces altered. So
Yeah. Now, I had been pushing Phil towards possibly playing, maybe even Riscaminator or Just Guy Control or something like that, just to see how it felt to play, a tier deck at Eternal Weekend. Because, like, yeah, you're going to run into a non-zero amount of people who are playing their 2 to 3 to 4 year old like legacy deck. I live in Pittsburgh and I own old cards. That is a factor in Eternal Weekend, especially anytime you go to a local metagame. There are going to be people that just own cards from that era that are like, oh, big tournament in my area, an SCG con in my area. I'm gonna go play. So that was one of the things I've been pushing. And comment below if you want to see Phil, play Narcits or play Teferi's.
Don't say Goblin Guide. I'm never sleeving up a Goblin Guide. I'm never sleeving up a Chalice Board. But I mean, the deck to sleeve up is definitely Nadu, because Urza Saga is objectively broken and Nadu is just abhorrently rancid. So that's where you got to be.
We love the band Rancid, so why not play Rancid too?
Yeah, it's true. And
Black,
also,
white.
Nadu now banned in Commander,
proving to be broken.
Again, proving to be broken. You can only play it at Eternal Weekend. Turns out.
Yeah. Only at Eternal Weekend, or only in your very rule zeroed. People who love for you to take 1,000 game actions during your turn and their turn, and then the other guy's turn. EDH.
Yeah, Zach, can we do? Okay, so this episode is about prepping and pivoting.
Yep.
And so I would like to, now that we're talking about Nadu, I would like to pivot to how is it that Nadu, which takes a bunch of non-deterministic game actions that hoard most of the time and around, gets to remain legal, but Sensei's Dividing Top remains in a cage.
Well, my argument is that I honestly think that Nadu is, we had that right after the ban announcement episode where I was like, I don't know, man. I don't think Nadu is like okay for this format. And then I really haven't seen it that much. Like I've seen some people play it online or whatnot, but it hasn't been like oppressive. It's just like, oh, if you don't have removal, you lose the game, which I think is totally fine and fair. But I think you might be correct. Taking all these game actions, highly annoying. That was the worst part of it for me. I was just like, oh, God, I'm just watching this person take like 15 game actions on Magic Online, which is very boring. It's a little less bad on if you're playing in paper, because you're not like click, 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 click. You're like, target this, draw a card. Target this, draw a card. Target this, draw a card. Target it. Like, it's not the same thing as like, the constant like ping pong of Magic Online where you're just like, I'm gonna do this. Okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. Like, it's much faster. But to that end, it could be. I haven't seen it played in paper yet, so I honestly don't know if it's one of those things where it might take too long. Do I think that cards that take too long or perceive to take too long should be banned in this format? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that I think that if it becomes ubiquitous, yeah, maybe that's an issue. But like, I don't know. We don't have Grand Prix anymore. We have one event every year, really, that even begs the question: is this deck taking too long and making everyone wait to go to the next round? And that's why, like, Sensei Dividing Top got banned, because like Grand Prix were taking like an extra 2 or 3 hours a day, for that like 1 or 2 guys that couldn't concede, right? So they died for Grand Prix sins, and Grand Prix don't exist anymore.
Well, we're getting the Spotlight series. Also, I have no comment further beyond successfully pivoting the episode into a territory that everybody wants us to shut the fuck up about, which is great. So yes. Success there. As you can see, we are good at prepping and pivoting. On the notion of prepping and pivoting, I think that like as we approach Eternal Weekends between Prague, Pittsburgh, whenever they actually announce dates, which maybe they won't, and Japan, that the thing to keep in mind is know what your pillars of the format are, and then actually get in practice. Like, I think now is probably a good time to pick one of the tier portions of the deck and to just start practicing with it, getting your reps in against the top decks. There isn't going to be another set release between now and
this is what it's going to look like. Yeah.
So this is what it's going to look like, and you're going to see blue-black in some to a very large degree. You're going to see Nadu in Breakfast to a very large degree. You'll see Eldrazi or or maybe even Cloud Post, but some form of, big mana, kill you with Sowing Mycospawn, the thing that exiles your lands. I've heard people calling it Sowing Mycospawn, but I'm pretty confident it's Mycospawn.
It's Mycospawn. Yeah.
It's Mycospawn. So
a Mycosynth is a mushroom.
Yeah, so just like be prepared to deal with the Mycospawn Eldrazi dot decks, whether that's big mana like Cloud Post or Eldrazi straight up. I think you're going to see more Eldrazi just because Glaring Flush Raker is a piece of shit. But like between that deck, so you have to be able to deal with Ancient Tomb, and then we also haven't seen a major event of this size since the Grief ban. So there will probably be some resurgence of decks that Grief was oppressing, a la a bunch of Ancient Tomb decks that were sort of, all in on one thing that just arbitrarily wins them the game if unchecked. And I think that if you are unprepared for that type of stuff, granted, every deck now just seems like it has 3 to 4 consigned to memory. So just playing against more, stifle-esque effects percentage-wise across the bulk of the format. Consigned to memory showing up in sideboards is very similar to what it seemed like a long time ago Surgical Extraction did. Like there was a time where Surgical Extraction was just like one of the most played cards, not because it ever showed up in main decks, but because it was in everybody's sideboard is like, 2 or 3 copies. And I think that that's where just consigned to memory lives. So maybe those decks aren't going to be as surging because that card sort of can, check initiative and that sort of thing. But I mean, Eldrazi, I don't think gives a shit. They just still beat you down. And that is powerful. So you got to be prepared for that. But I think the 2 big decks in the room from my POV going in is going to be blue-black, whether that's just, blue-black pre-con, which is just all of the busted black cards that they printed with the old blue cards of free counterspells and cantrips. The, new form of Rescaminator, which is just cutting the griefs for a couple of Tamios and Thoughtseizes, and then just otherwise running the same game plan back. And Nadu in Breakfast. I think that there is the fair Bant Nadu decks, but I feel like, at least in my experience so far, it's just been Breakfast. Like the people that were playing the Bant Nadu decks that, have the non-deterministic loops that like have to pass the turn, not necessarily the best against Vexing Bauble now existing. It's like you can't just pass the turn with 7 counterspells in hand and expect it to be good enough because somebody can just tutor up a Vexing Bauble through an Urza Saga and blank your entire hand. So that's just not as reliable as it is to just straight up kill them outright by playing Breakfast. So I think that there's going to be a more slant on that. So essentially having relatively good graveyard hate to stop the, busted starts out of blue-black Scaminator, blue-black Froginator is what everybody's calling it now. So having a way to deal with that, plus being able to stop at least one axis of Breakfast, which also helps with some amount of Storm decks trying to do the Gaia's, what's the card that they get off Beseech? It's always just Gaia's whatever. It's the Yogwill, the green Yogwill.
Oh, Gaia's Will.
Gaia's Will, yeah. So it cuts off the graveyard line out of those decks. So having some amount of graveyard hate is going to be really important. And then having some amount of effects that can either stop Eldrazi from being able to just go off and kill you with their fast mana. And I think also I think we're also going to see a pretty strong resurgence of Urza Saga decks. I think one thing that has sort of gone under the radar still is how powerful just putting a Vexing Bauble into play and blanking a bunch of hands is, because between Teferis and Vexing Bauble, like I think Cavern of Souls, I think counter magic in general is just at its worst if it's not doing something that ends the game on the spot. Yeah. So something like Froginator just being able to go and Tomb Reanimate, kill you with the free counter magic actually is powerful, but doing something where you are trying to exchange resources, it's sort of where like the non-Sultai Beanstalk decks, I think are just going to be otherwise entirely depleted at this event. At the EWs, I just think we're not going to see any of it whatsoever. If we do, it'll be like on the fringes. I think if Beanstalk shows up at all, it'll be in a Days Wasteland shell, and that's it. And even then, it'll still be on the fringes because I think that those decks are just going to be a step behind the top decks in the format right now because
the mana bases are their biggest weakness too.
The biggest weakness, but Urza Saga being able to tutor up Vexing Bauble means that the whole benefit, like the pre-con requirement of Beanstalk not letting you really be flexible. Now you actually have to pay mana for your shit because otherwise it just free counters them. So you can draw cards, but you're not actually affecting the board. And Beanstalk is pretty inflexible in that you need those free cards in order to actually churn through your deck in meaningful ways. So like not being able to play your Solitudes or not being able to play your Force of Wills, or like those stuff just being cut off for free against something that the deck already otherwise has a problem against, which is Urza Saga, because it's otherwise it's a land and those decks don't interact with the mana bases.
You need to be a leyline binding deck, and then that means you're playing the worst version of the deck.
Right. And it also means that your leyline bindings will only trade at parity with a Vexing Bauble if you already have Beanstalk on the table, because they will just cycle it out of play when you target it with your. Exactly. So like you will always just be down those exchanges unless your deck is already operating at the means that it needs to operate, and it's already going to be playing from behind because all those other decks are faster and have I win buttons in them. And if you want to know anything about I win buttons, click on the video above Zach's head. So I think that we are going to see a shift where this year's EW is going to be a lot faster, because all of the top, last year, the Temur Delver and Grixis Delver decks were around, and so people cared about getting your life total to 0, where now your life total is either wherever it's at or just gone. Eldrazi will just deplete you, or you will just lose because you're getting Atraxid or you're getting breakfasted.
It says something about the format, about how much people care about their life totals and other people's life totals, when Lightning Bolt is like almost not played right now.
Well, Lightning Bolt is also not played right now because of those top decks. Doesn't get rid of Frog, doesn't get rid of any of the Eldrazi, doesn't get rid of Nadu.
Doesn't get rid of players, not at the speed you need it to, Yeah. It's like not a good way to kill opponents. It's not a good way to kill creatures, right? So if even in a deck like, Temur Delver, that could buy you a turn or two, but like that's not how decks are winning. They're not winning incrementally. They're winning like in 2 turns, not in not turn 2. They're like, oh, I got this guy out. The game will be over ostensibly in 2 turns, right?
Yeah, I think one thing that we haven't seen all that much of yet that could disrupt this metagame that we've expected so far, because we haven't really seen how Duskmourn is shaken out, because Duskmourn is still very recent. Right. But I do expect, now granted, it is still an Urza Saga deck. It's still just a black Urza Saga deck. But I could see Saga Storm making a resurgence, because they are just getting straight up Demonic Tutor back into added to their deck. And I'm talking about Demonic Console out of Duskmourn. So the addition of that extremely powerful tutor in a deck that will have a relatively easy time turning on Delirium if they just build their deck in a way that does so, means that they're already doing something very powerful, in that playing main deck Leyline of the Voids is going to hose the other 2 top decks, which I believe to be Nadu Breakfast and Froginator. So they'll have a leg up there against the perceived top meta. And then Urza Saga is objectively broken, and they're very much an Urza Saga deck. And now they're also getting a Demonic Tutor that Urza Saga will help enable by putting 2 different card types into the yard. It'll just be very easy for them to get accelerated, consistent starts. So I also expect that deck to show up, even though it hasn't necessarily shown up since we haven't had a really significant amount of time with Duskmourn yet. But
now, I think also like the Jewel Storm could see an uptick because of Marina Vendrell's Grimoire, right? That 6 mana draw 5. That's like also a Lich. So that could also be a thing that like makes that deck like a contender that has been kind of dead for a minute. But Bowmaster is like on kind of an all-time low right now, which is wild to say. I still want to see it banned. Just because if it exists, if it's there, that stifles the ability to brainstorm, to draw cards, to just do whatever in the normal way that pre 2020 Magic cards could get you card advantage. Now every Magic card has to say put into your hand for it to be useful. But if we're seeing less Orcish Bowmasters, Marina Vendrell's Grimoire gives some new life to those Jewel Storm decks.
Yeah, I mean, between Teferi and Grimoire, I don't know if anybody's going to forgive you, Zach.
What, you don't like Grimoire?
Well, it's Grimoire, but
hey, man, that's an Ohio accent.
It's no Ohio accent.
It's a flat Midwestern accent.
I'll say that I don't respect the Grimoire blue artifact decks nearly as much. Not because they're not powerful; they are. I just think that it will show up in significantly less numbers if it shows up outside of anyone's hands outside of Tony Scaponi. And the people who are dedicated to doing whatever Tony's going to do at an event, because the means to get onto that deck and practice with it are significantly higher than something like Black Saga Storm. Black Saga Storm, a lot of time, will just play itself because it gets Bowmaster and Dauthi Voidwalker and Free Winds and Urza Saga and all these cards that otherwise
play Barrogoyf in the board. Yeah, of course.
But the Jewel deck, that requires a bunch of cards that people might not have necessarily in their collection that are also really expensive. Like, how many people that are actually going to move on to that deck? It's really hard to move on to a deck that requires Transmute Artifacts and a bunch of what's the 2-mana
Monoliths and stuff. Yeah,
like those are not cheap cards, and if you are not dedicated to just playing that deck a lot in the future, it's really hard to pivot onto. Where pivoting onto Black Saga Storm is relatively easy, because if you were playing any of the other decks with the best cards in it, then you already have your Bowmasters and your Dauthi Voidwalkers and your Urza Sagas, and then all you really need is like the combo cards that I would more believe are in people's collections, like LEDs. Some decks don't even need LED, right? So you need some amount of Helms if you can get access to Helm, but Helm is not nearly as much of a barrier price point than getting Transmute Artifact and Grim Monolith is. So I don't respect the Transmute deck nearly as much because of that barrier, which means that you're going to play against committed players that are committed to it. I just think that is a lot less than people who are just want to pivot and make a good metagame call, which might be Black Saga Storm and just black cards in general. So it's like, if you don't have a plan, but like, again, you can aggregate those cards down, because the crossover between, okay, they're graveyard decks or Urza Saga decks and or just the generic precon overpowered black card decks. So it's like, if you wanted to approach the format that wasn't just playing one of those decks, if you can find a way to just beat up on black cards in Urza Saga, then you will, for the most part, have a good, maybe have a good matchup against those other things. But all those decks are so efficient that you're probably just better off figuring out which one of those decks is actually the best to step into the room with, and then step in prepared with a game plan against each one for them. And that's where the prep part of our episode comes in, which is, okay, when you are prepping and choosing which deck, which is now the time, like if you're going to EW in North America, you're going to have a couple months. Now is a good time to just figure out which one.
Get in 100 reps before, like 100 actual match reps before you decide to choose, like, that is your deck.
100 reps, and also know, if you're playing a lot online, know the dexterity differences. If you're playing Nadu, it is a rancid dexterity deck, because you have to keep track of which cards have been targeted twice and which ones haven't, and which ones have been targeted once, as you're flipping cards to different zones in ways that are all meaningful and matter. And you're going to get a lot of convoluted rectangles onto your table and having to figure out which ones. If you don't know all of your lines and all that, like, the dexterity of that deck is not easy if you aren't fluid with it. And you should be. You should know how to do that.
There is a rules update that just happened today too, about missing saga triggers and stuff like that. So, if you're a trigger counter person, like, definitely look that up. You can look at my. I think I just reposted. So, like, if you look at my Twitter, you're going to see, like, what the new ruling is with that, and that will be in effect at Eternal Weekend. So you have to be on point with your triggers. You can't just rely on Magic Online to catch them all for you.
Yeah, long story short, for the players that haven't heard yet, the difference now for any saga is it is considered a missed trigger if you forget to put a thing on your a counter on your thing. So, like, that means that it is now very important that all of you Urza Saga players know that when the lore actually goes onto your card, because everybody does it differently. Sometimes people will add lore and change it before they draw their card. Sometimes people will do it.
Happens in the main phase.
It happens in the main phase after you've drawn your card. Then you respond. Like, but if somebody doesn't do it, like, let's say we're in their main phase and goes up to chapter 2, where they don't have to, like, take the action before the card searches. If they do something in the main phase before putting the lore counter, that's a missed trigger.
Yeah, you missed the trigger.
And that's not something that you have to point out now. It's their responsibility to remember their trigger. And that is going to be something that comes up for a lot of players that are going to miss that trigger, because they are just used to being able to be sloppy with it, because nobody actually knows how sagas in general work. Yeah. So if you miss your saga trigger, that's on you now. So you're already playing with the most busted card in the format for free that does all the things for you. And now you actually have to do something. At least you have to do something.
One other thing I wanted to mention is that we got Phil a camera. He's not using it right now, but Phil will have a legit camera set up really soon. So we'll have Phil in 4K as well, which would be great.
What was everybody calling me from Power Rangers all this time?
You look like Zordon, man.
Yeah, Zordon. So the Zordon days are soon going to be behind us.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
we'll as much as lights, you guys, we'll set them all up.
As much as you turn to me for ways to beat Repulsa.
Repulsa, yeah. I was more of a Zed guy myself.
Yeah, I mean, one of these days we'll just we'll like overhaul our entire thing, and it'll just look like we're in what's the combined thing that the Power Rangers did?
Combined thing?
Yeah, they would each do their thing, and then they would come together to like become the
Morphin Time. Zord stuff. I don't know, man.
Like, like each one of them would come in. I stopped
watching Power Rangers and started playing Magic in the same year. It was to give you a reference.
Power Rangers was sort of like the Transformers thing, where each one of them like became like a part of the thing that would then fight, and then it was just like 2 action figures that they would film as ways to like get these scenes.
Well, the filming had already happened. All the Japanese like fighting film part already existed, so they just like created new story with what they could find for for the film. It was like a whole different show in Japan.
All right, so let's now talk about the second part of this episode, which is
Bulk and Skull,
and pivot to talking about the Power Rangers, which is what everybody wants to talk about. Because I think it's clear if we can figure out which deck each Power Ranger would play, that would give us a better sense of what the metagame at EW would be.
Billy would be playing mono blue Dreadnought, right?
Billy's the blue
one.
Okay.
Right?
Zac is easily going to take that in this tournament for sure.
Trina is on mud for sure. Trina's
so
on
these
mud.
are the people. So Billy and Trina are the 2 characters that are just happy to be there. They're not looking to win the thing.
Pink Ranger. I forget her name. I know her actress.
You forget Kim?
Kim.
You forgot Kim?
I knew Amy Jo Johnson is her name as an actress, but Kim is a burn player. So maybe is it Delver? She's got a pterodactyl, right? Like that's her thing.
Sprite dragons, yep.
Yep. Then you got Zac is on Pox.
No, dude, Zac is going to be on Black Saga Storm for sure, taking down the whole tournament. Storm.
Okay. What does he got? A Stegosaurus?
He's on a Triceratops.
Who's got the Stegosaurus? Is that the blue guy?
I don't know, but then you have the Green Mage that's going to just ruin everybody's day playing Sewing Michael Spong.
Yeah, well, then don't forget. So that's Jason. Jason's the red one.
Red Ranger.
Right? But he's obviously a Beanstalk player. That's just like play the big thing, right? Like he's in a friggin' Tyrannosaurus Rex. He's on play the big thing. Maybe he's on like not Stegosaurus. The Dinosaurs in Space card.
Oh, I mean, that would also be bad. Although I like playing against that deck because it doesn't want to play against Terminus, and that's all I try to do.
And then Tommy is on Reanimator, dude. Perfect example. Tommy, Green Ranger, Vanquished, White Ranger, Resurrected, right? Tommy's on Reanimator.
It's all in the flavor, and that's it. That's how you prepare for Eternal Weekend.
What about Bulk and Skull, dude?
Bulk and Skull, and also what's Rita doing? What's Zordon playing?
Zordon is probably playing Miracles.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's the only way to be.
Yeah, zing! If you have listened this far, you did not, and you just heard me get Phil.
Yeah,
the thing is, this video.
In order to resonate the way that Zac is resonating right now, you have to be deep in the recent lore of Eternal Durdles.
Oh man, you got super deep in and deep in the unrecent lore of.
Yeah. So the only reasonable response here is to be like if you're sitting there right now going, "What the hell are they talking about?" You're in the right place. You're living a healthy, balanced lifestyle.
I think then Skull is on Pox, right? Skull is on like he's on like 2-card Monty, control.
Yeah.
And Bulk, ooh, is there like I don't even know. Is there a deck that I guess Bulk is also on Beanstalk, but he's on 5-color Beanstalk, man. He's playing the fatties.
Rita Repulsa's on the Super Friends.
Yeah, and some sort of
Shit.
Godzilla thing, maybe. Like just playing like she's playing traditional Reanimator, like red black Reanimator.
Again, you got to have your graveyard hate prepared for this event. If you do.
Yeah. And from there, the putties are just everyone on Delver.
Yeah. They're actually going to take this thing down.
Yeah.
You got to be prepared for if the players who are going to play Grixis, you got to be prepared for Barrow Goyf out of the board. You're definitely going to still run into plenty of Bone Masters, and everybody's going to hate it. And another Goyf is going to chunk you for 6 for 1 mana. So.
All right. Well, with that said, thank you everybody for watching. We will catch you next time. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help sustain the legacy content ecosystem. Just subscribe to this channel goes a long way to reminding YouTube that people love and support this format. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile, you should think about supporting us through Patreon. Both the links for subscription and Patreon are right here. And if you're listening on an audio format, you can go to patreon.com/eternaldurdles. Thanks so much for watching.